Education and Training Committee of that coalition. For nearly 20 years, he worked as an emergency physician at Ridgeview Medical Center in Laconia, Minnesota. There, he developed a position for a family violence services coordinator and developed new screening tools for use in healthcare settings. He represented the MMA on the American Medical Association National Advisory Council on Violence and Abuse and served as the chair of that council from 2001 to 2006. He is a founding member of the board of directors of the Academy on Violence and Abuse and has served as their president and as board chair. He retired from clinical practice at the end of 2011. However, he continues to work to find more effective ways to serve the needs of all patients impacted by violence, abuse, or other traumatic events. His passion is in advancing the understanding of the link between adverse life experiences and the long-term health consequences, both for healthcare providers who lack the knowledge and for patients who too often feel abandoned by a healthcare system that doesn't know what to do with them. Along with being the chair of the Minnesota Alliance Against Violence, he is participating in a project through Minnesota Communities Caring for Children, Prevent Child Abuse Minnesota, to train community resilience coaches. He has worked with the Minnesota Department of Health in their Injury and Violence Prevention Unit. He now works as an independent consultant and speaker on various issues related to violence and abuse identification, response, prevention, and resiliency. Dr. McCall.
Sure, I'll use this because even if I think I speak loud enough, it's always nice to hear more clearly. Thank you, and I want to really thank Connie and Alexandra House and Rasmussen College for giving us the opportunity to meet today, to come together and talk about some other ways of kind of trying to make a difference besides what we've been doing for such a long period of time. And I don't know how many of you have read any articles recently that suggest that perhaps things are getting better, that violence and abuse rates are going down, sexual assault rates are going down. Have any of you read anything along those lines? I know that the Darkness to Light organization recently changed their rates from the 1 in 4 that we talk about in terms of child sexual abuse to 1 in 10, because they suggest that the latest research suggests that. Somehow I think that maybe it's less than 1 in 4, but it certainly isn't as little as 1 in 10. And I think that if in fact those things were true, we'd all be able to say, hey, we can cut our staff next year. We can cut our budget requests next year. And is there anybody in here who's been able to cut their budget requests because things are getting better? You know, I just don't think so. So what we're about is really, let me tell you a little bit about the Minnesota Alliance Against Violence. About 3 years ago, a bunch of people, a large group of people, got together in Minneapolis, thanks to the Greater Twin Cities United Way and Marcia Fink over there representing them, helped to pull together a bunch of people and said, hey, is there another way we can go about this? Is there something else we can do to make Minnesota a better place to live? And that group of people eventually birthed this organization, the Minnesota Alliance Against Violence. We'll call it the Minnesota Alliance, with the belief that we could and should work to end violence and oppression in our communities. And how can we do this? Can we get together in a different way? So that group looked at trying to define things a little different. What could we do in terms of systems change? What could we do in terms of helping to promote research, education, public awareness, and so on? Rather than just continuing to say, okay, we've got to work to stop domestic abuse, we've got to work to stop child abuse and elder abuse and everything else, we said, how can we relook at this a little bit, kind of going across every section and really work within communities to make communities safer, giving people a sense of hope and so on. So we had this grandiose vision of making Minnesota a healthy, violence-free, oppression-free state. And of course, it's a wonderful vision, but then of course, like everybody else, the money is sort of lacking to be able to do that. So we decided we were going to pick one piece and work on something little, but could have a huge impact. And that is through our public awareness and public responsibility efforts, and realizing that we all have a responsibility to make a difference, and we came across the project called Connect. And we decided to use that concept and start to bring it out to communities and see if we can get interest in looking at this and taking up this idea another way to make a difference. And this brings me to bringing up, and I think that invoking the name, the legacy, the history of Nelson Mandela. And of course, he died yesterday, and if you watch CNN, you probably have heard more than you want to hear about Nelson Mandela. And he's taught us many, many things, but there are three things that I wanted to talk about today that I think he left us. One is that he believed that if you wanted to really get something done, if you wanted to make a change, and you were persistent, you probably could do it. You had to believe you could do it and stay with it, and you can make a change, and he made an incredible change. The second thing that he left us with is that the word is more powerful than the sword. And he showed that in many ways. Now, you can think of this in two different ways. And the word is more powerful than the sword, because if we take up our sword to try to end violence and abuse, we're really bringing ourselves down to the same level as everybody else. And so we have to rise above that and show that we have the capacity through our words to make a difference. On the other hand, I can tell you that in my practice, both in family practice and emergency medicine, there are many, many stories of women who said, I wish you would hit me instead of saying the things that he says to me, because it hurts a lot more what somebody says to me. Unfortunately, what you say to somebody that hurts somebody, that's not a crime. And so when we deal with the criminal level of domestic violence and abuse and so on, we're missing out on the other things that have as much or sometimes greater long-term impact. And that is the negative power of the word as well. And the third thing that we're left with from Nelson Mandela is that if you really want change to happen, if you want to have a better environment, then you have to also be a model for that. To be a role model, to show people what you want. And I think that that's something that often is left out. But we work in many different ways to try to improve our communities, to try to stop violence that's out there, and then in our own environments, we behave in a way that isn't quite what we would like to identify as the healthiest way. And so what we're asking to do now is to say, all right, how do we take on this role, this responsibility? How do we ourselves become role models in our community that says this is healthy behavior? This is how people should interact between each other. And that's the whole idea around the Connect as one of these options, is how do we create healthy workplaces? Places where we can say, okay, now the standard in our community is no longer that we accept violence and abuse as something that's just going to happen. But we're going to say, no, we're going to believe and expect in our community that we have a different standard of behavior that we're going to all try to live up to. And so that's the hope from all of this. So we bring to you from the Alliance this concept that you'll hear about today. It's one way of approaching this. We want to see what you think about how this might play out in your various workplaces, environments, or whatever. We're going to have you do a couple of exercises this afternoon to see if we can stimulate some things, and we're anxious to get your feedback from that. And I guess at this point, it really is an opportunity for us to hear something a little bit different. We all go to lots and lots of conferences, and we hear lots and lots of things, and we leave those conferences and say, oh, that sounded great. Then we go back and do the same thing over and over again. And how many people are frustrated at the end of the day thinking, how much longer do I have to keep doing the same thing over and over again without seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? And I think by looking at this in a little different way and setting a little different kind of standard and being that model that we really need to be within our communities and our own homes, that we can change an environment. I'll leave you with one little story, which is a story about from centuries ago, a little fishing village on the border of the sea. And this fishing village, fishing was everything. And so when the fishermen back then, they called women home, nursing their babies, they would go out and they always knew that there was a certain percentage of people that didn't come back when they would go out in their boats. And they decided this was just something they accepted, that they would lose a certain percentage of people every time they went out. Now sometimes one of the fishermen would come back at dead or whatever and say, you know, it's just really rough out there. We run into these rocks and other things. Some boats would come floating back with holes in them, and they realized that there were some things in that environment that were very harsh, that were high risk for them to not make it back. So the committee decided, how are we going to do something about this? Well, they saw the holes in the boat and they figured that the water was coming in, and so they sunk. So they started sending out extra people in the boats to start bailing the water out. Said, okay, if water's coming in, the quickest fix we can do right now is to send somebody else out and bail the water out of the boat when it's coming in so the other people can continue their work. Well, that helped a little bit, but it didn't solve the problem. So they said, well, we really need to patch the holes because we can't keep bailing the water out all the time. So they developed a patch kit. So they go out, and if they get a hole, they quickly patch at that hole, but then there'd be another hole and another hole. So they have to keep patching. So they said, you know, maybe we need to make the boats a little stronger, more resilient. So they came up with a new material. They found some other wood, stronger wood, and they made the boats better. And that helped. But it still didn't stop the problem until they finally said, you know, I guess we have to invest in really changing the environment, changing where our boats are sailing. We need to go out and do something, either chart a course that's safer for people, or to get rid of some of those rocks or boulders or whatever and move them so it's no longer a risk of people going out. And when they finally decided to make that investment, as much as it took away from the fishing for a while because they had to go out and work on this, they changed the environment. And that's what we're talking about now, is how do we change the environment in which we all work? Can we do this another way? There are many different ways of approaching the problem, but this is another one, to go back a little bit further upstream and make a difference. So, I'd like to introduce you at this point to Pat Wagner. She is founder and president of On Track for Life. And she is project manager, director, coordinator, all those things, whatever she needs to be, for the Minnesota Alliance. She's been working with us for a while, and I have found her to be a kindred spirit and a great person to work with. She's going to tell you a little bit more about this concept and what we do throughout the day, and I'll just leave it there. There you go.
Thank you, Dan. Dave, when you were sharing that we have some activities for the afternoon, I saw a couple people go, afternoon? Afternoon? That's perfect. I saw it. I just want to share first a little bit about the flow of the day. And as this isn't conducive, you know, for this room, so what I'll be doing is turning side to side and saying it a couple times. But the agenda, which is not hard copy, it's up here, saving paper, but also to drive those of you left-brainers, logical thinkers, nuts. Welcome, it's happened. Setting the stage, Dave, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to spend just a few moments talking about engagement overview, some theory behind it, and a couple models, with Connect being one of those. And then it will be that Schroeder, on behalf of Anna Marie, will be sharing for about an hour. So I'm starting now, left-brainers, thinkers, 60 minutes where that will happen. And then we'll take a break. Restrooms, if you haven't found them, are down the hall that way. And then, not in the afternoon, but after Deb's presentation, we are going to be breaking into small groups. Because when we are really wanting to learn something, we could talk and talk and talk, or you have presenters talk and talk, but it's from each other and from finding out and figuring out where you stand on some things. And the engagement piece of talking to one another that we really learn from experiential kind of pieces. So that's where the afternoon will be. The end time, oops, not down there yet. Last, we're going to just end with some takeaways. Dave will kind of bring a summary. Did you like how I gave that to you, Dave? Bring a summary of the day together, this morning that we're spending together, and just we'll be asking for some evaluations as well. We are looking to be ending between 12:30 and 1, just so we can breathe with that. And the reason I wanted to bring up that I put the agenda up here, left brain, right brain, as we all know, people process information differently. So this is my simple way of just saying we process differently, and we need to honor that. We need to honor the fact that we each have masters in life experiences from different walks of life. So no matter where we bring, or where you bring what comes up from today for you, is when we are interacting with people, to keep in mind, we absolutely think and process differently. So loud. I want to talk about phases of engagement. Just phases of engagement for when change can happen. These phases of agreement, you'll have to forgive me. I'm one of these people who needs space. This chair is driving me nuts. I should back up first so you understand the context that I'm coming from of what I'm sharing. For over the 18 years, I've had the privilege of working with all sorts of collaborations, alliances, strategic partners. My role with On Track is just always working with groups and dynamics of people. So the context of what I'm sharing really comes from that. And so in terms of these phases of engagement, it comes from late Robert. Robert just passed away this year, excellent resource, Robert Greenbaum out of Boston area. He worked with a lot of international companies on marketing. He also worked with a lot of nonprofits on marketing. When we talk about public awareness, that is marketing. It's taking passion, beliefs, and marketing it. It's taking the first phase, which is awareness. It's just helping people become aware. All of you, or the majority of you in this room, have high awareness. What we're talking about is a passion of yours. But there's this whole broad population that may not be aware, consciously or unconsciously aware of violence, or they don't want to admit to it. But their awareness of the different areas of violence and abuse is not there. So the first phase is awareness. Awareness then, I'm going to say awareness here. Then it moves to helping people come to a comprehension, that they start to understand it. So it moves from awareness to more understanding. Understanding violence, abuse, the different areas. So awareness, comprehension, and understanding. And then it moves to conviction. For action to happen, people have to be aware, they have to understand, and they have to move to a place of conviction. Action comes at the end of these stages. Sometimes we think that just because we are passionate about something, everybody else should be. But it needs to go through these stages, so wherever we move forward with a engagement, a community engagement campaign, a community engagement awareness, keep in mind, it starts with awareness, comprehension, conviction, and then action comes from it. So what kind of structure? Let's say a group of you, and some of you I know are doing, many of you are doing just wonderful things, and some are already in different organizations or groups. But there's different opportunities to work collaboratively together. And so there's different words out there. Collaboration is the big buzzword. We all want to work in collaboration. That looked a little sarcastic, didn't it? I didn't mean it that way because I work in a lot of collaborations. But the word itself, a Latin word, means to labor together, to actually labor together. What I've seen with many collaborations, extremely powerful. So extremely powerful in collaborations. Of late, what I'm seeing is that groups become a collaboration and they stay in the collaboration. It's like, we'll meet once a month for 3 hours, and we'll continue to meet, and we continue to meet, and we continue to meet. And the collaboration takes a life of its own versus action, versus moving outside of the collaboration. So the piece in terms of working together jointly, or again, to labor together. It's extremely important with collaborations. What happens is that piece about roles and responsibilities, so that you actually, whoever is at the table is actually laboring together. So we know what your responsibility is, or your responsibility, that it's not just showing up once a month for 3 hours. Big difference. And I really am seeing, in honesty, that collaborations of late are staying self-contained. So I'm just pushing and motivating, move out. Funders want to know all about your collaboration. Yes, collaborate, but move it into action. We use the word alliance. Alliance is intentional connections. When we think of alliances, and we'll use the Minnesota Alliance Against Violence, is it's different programs and organizations that are out there who have their focus, who have their mission, who have decided to align together to work on a common goal. And that's really what you can look at as an alliance. There's strategic partners, strategic partnerships. Strategic partnerships is when 2 or 3 entities have to work together or they would not continue. I'll use a really light example. The 3 of us, David, myself, and Deb. Today would not happen if it wasn't all 3 of us here as strategic partners. I cannot do Deb's presentation. I could fake it, but you know. And David's introduction. That's not from me, that's from David and his life experiences. And I'm sharing from my experiences. We are strategic partners. This would not happen if all 3 of us weren't here. Strategic partnership takes all of these others into a much more serious place. Ours I'm doing lightly. But usually when you move into a strategic partnership, it goes into letters of agreement. It really does say, you will perform this and this and this, I will perform this and this, and it's a contractual kind of a piece. There's language of teams. We're going to be a group, we're going to be a collective. A lot of this, I'm going to say it's semantics. It's semantics. And what I'm encouraging is, whatever the name that you may put around your collective effort together, and I'm not saying this whole group together, but that would be delightful. You can call yourself a collaboration. If you do, be certain, get the clarities in there. Whatever you want to call yourself, if it's the alliance, if it's strategic partners, team, group, collective, it is so important to really determine early on what are the responsibilities of being on that group, that team, to work together. And this is my little squiggly. I'll describe it. The whole piece, this has like a big circle. In the center of the circle is whatever the initiative is, that target, that thing you want to do together. The little circles on the outside of it are all the organizations and people who are working together. It's important that you see this visually in the sense of sometimes with collaborations, people feel they're going to lose their own identity. Their organization is going to lose the identity. Or if we're on the same, we'll say, collaboration, you're going to get money and I'm not. Or we're going against the same money funders. People get defensive. So for collaborations and alliances, there has to be a readiness state to actually collaborate and start to trust. There's a vulnerability, there's a trust. I have seen many I've seen many collaborations start in that first phase of just excitement. Really excited. Start to put things down on paper. Then they move into a budget. And all of a sudden it falls apart. It falls apart because why do your organization gets 10,000 and mine only gets 5, and she gets 50,000 for hers? These are things to know ahead of time. Passion is so important. But with these kind of things, for groups to move forward together, there has to be the opportunity to have candid conversations early. To really talk about funding early. Otherwise, I mean, when we really, just candidly from my heart and my head, we only have so much time in the day. We only have so much energy. And when we get into groups and start working with a collaboration, it is so important that we have open conversations early. What are some processes? I just wanted to, again, just share kind of concepts of what groups are like, engagement phases, but then there's also, what are the process? How do we move out of being in our little circle together to doing action? Today, one of these models you're going to hear about, which is Connect. The focus is on the development of healthy relationships and has a curriculum that you will be focusing on. Because of it, over 450, I think it's more than that, individuals in the St. Cloud area at various businesses and so forth have received this training. So this is a model that has been out there and works into moving into action. There's another model out there. Has anyone heard of Art of Hosting? I have not gone through the training. It's a 3-day training, but I'm hearing more and more about it is another tool for helping us move together collectively on a concept or on a passion that we have as a community. We'll have some information on the table in that hallway, so those of you who are interested in it, again, talking about how a community organically learns skill set to move passion and collective ideas and thoughts into action steps. There's another tool we want to have you be aware of, and actually it was Dave and Connie who made me aware of a book. Trying hard is not good enough. So those left-brainers, otherwise it will be up here on the flip chart for the rest of you, but trying hard is not good enough. The author's name is Mark Friedman. This book is filled with action steps. His whole piece is to move fast, to have clarity, and he brings a tremendous amount of tools. One of the pieces that really struck for me was he talked about the importance for any community engagement. It needs to have a combination of passion and discipline. And I have seen this, and when he's referring to discipline, he's saying you can have all the passion in the world, but unless we start stepping towards something, it doesn't happen. I had the privilege of working with a small nonprofit. This was quite a few years ago, and we were doing strategic planning. And of course, at first day, we have all the stickies, all around the entire room. When you lay out the question, if money wasn't an issue or time wasn't an issue, what would you do? So this room was filled with all these stickies, and the board and some of the other people that they had invited. At the end of the day, I could see their eyes, their body language starting to get heavier and heavier and heavier, because the walls were filled with passion, absolutely filled with passion. Fortunately, they all came back the next day, and we paused, and we looked at all of it, and I said, all right, choose 3. Choose 3 of these stickies. Just choose 3. We need to just start someplace. And that's hard. That is so hard when we have such deep passion about some things. But it's a matter, and David, you had said this earlier, it's just to start. Start with 1, start with 2. So, excellent resources. This other one that I wrote down, you will not find it anywhere. This is a word I made up. Interconnectivity, if you can say that a few times, interconnectivity bridging. And what I'm referring to there is there are many things going on that are good. It's bridging some of those. Can we work together? We are interconnected. Can we build some bridges that will enhance the impact, the ripple effect? The ripple effect. So there's that. I also put up a question mark. Some of you may have a different model of how to engage community, or something will be created. I really want to encourage allowing yourselves, when you're in a group, to say, we don't have to do it this way or this way or this way or this way. These are great tools. But you may come up and go, Mark might just come out and say, what if we did this? And you all pause who are in that group and you go, that's just perfect. I'm really encouraging that you honor that pausing and go, is there another way to do it? Or to take bits and pieces of these other tools. Every situation is different. And it's different because of the different energies and the life experiences of people who are leading it. So these, again, are just certain models to move forward in a process. The other piece I want to say that I've learned is it's an issue of readiness state. Readiness state is so important. And it's the readiness state of everyone in the gathering. Many people, or some people will say, I am so ready, yes, let's meet, and absolutely. And it's coming out of my mouth. But it isn't followed by my action. Maybe because I'm working so much in my office and I have so many other things. It's a readiness state, our vulnerability and honesty to be able to say, I am ready to have somebody from my agency at that meeting, we are committed. And to give yourself permission to say, we are really passionate about that, but right now is not a good time for us to be at the table. I'm really encouraging that honesty and that vulnerability because motion will happen. And that's really what I keep pushing, is motion. If you start spinning or stalling out, pause, bring somebody else in if you need to, but to move, to always be in motion. The Minnesota Alliance, Engaging Communities to End Violence and Oppression. There are 8 areas. I just wanted to share that really that the Alliance has been focusing or want to focus on. And on a personal note, I want to thank each of you because each of you are involved in efforts to end violence and abuse. I was one of these people until 9 months ago that was in this awareness, maybe not even in this awareness place. 9 months ago, a dear friend of mine disappeared in Denver. We were college. Mankato State is where we all went. There was like 15 of us who've been friends for over 30 years. That's aging me, isn't it? I think it's more than 30. Stayed in a football pool. Legal, illegal, I don't know. Stayed in a football pool since then, so I put in my $15, and I'm the type of person that says all the home teams, you know, or everybody who's wearing red or who's wearing blue. But what happened 9 months ago is that this one of the 15 people who had been in touch with each other for 30 years disappeared. Wheat Ridge, Colorado, totally disappeared. I was just with her 2 weeks before, making plans to go climbing. I was I'm a hiker, climber. Disappeared. First time I had experienced anything like that. They found her body in July. What happened for me individually, personally, I moved really fast. I moved real fast from awareness to comprehension, to understanding, to conviction, to action. Part of my saying yes when the Minnesota Alliance called me was because of action. It was to be able to utilize my passion as well as my skills. Wouldn't it be something if we could enhance the awareness at an earlier state? That's all I'm really encouraging. On personal, as I said, thank you. I really want to thank you. On a professional note, I want to applaud your willingness and your openness to be investing this time here this morning to really look at what are the nuggets, what are the tools that may assist moving some of this forward. At this time, I would like to introduce Deb Schrader, who is going to step through one of the processes, and it is the Connect process. So, thank you.
You should go back to those 8 principles. Is that in here? The 8 principles. It was bullying.
Good morning, everyone. I think I finally woke up. The caffeine kicked in. So, welcome so much. Today I'm just going to be going over the Connect, growing a healthy relationship community. A little bit about me. The first thing you need to know is that I was an adorable child. This is the first and last good picture that was ever taken. So, several years ago, we were cleaning out my mom and dad's house and came across this box, and amazing, just, anyway, I am a student, well, I graduated from St. Cloud State University in speech communications. I've lived in Oregon, I've lived in St. Cloud, I've lived in St. Joseph, and I am now living with my husband and 5 cats in my home that I grew up in. And so it's kind of a full circle sort of thing with me. I began with Anna Marie's Alliance back in the year 2000. I've been with them 13 years and 5 months. I want to retire in a couple of years. I haven't decided when I'm going to do the countdown yet, but it'll start soon. And over the years, I was hired to do their community education, okay, and their marketing. And then pretty soon it was like, we've got a couple, 2, 3, 4 programs we'd like you to supervise. And those have come and gone, and pretty soon it was around the year 2005 or